Hi, and welcome to the IGN Spoilercast for Iron Man 3.
Hello and welcome to the IGN Iron Man 3 Spoilercast. I'm Chris Tilley and I'm joined by Tom Butler and Daniel Krupa. And it's called a Spoilercast for a reason because we're going to go into great details about the plot. So if you haven't seen the film yet, pause this video, go away and watch it and come back. And if you have, here we go. So boys, we saw the film last night. What did you think when the lights came up at the end of the movie? What was your first thoughts?
I think, after a few seconds, I thought, that's probably the best of the three Iron Man movies, I think.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think so.
It's a bold claim.
But I don't think it's that bold a claim. I think the first two Iron Man movies, while enjoyable, aren't, like, life-changing.
So you think this is a life-changing movie?
Yes. Oh no, I need to backtrack. No, I just think it's much more entertaining. I think it's much funnier. I think it has better action than the other two, and it feels like he goes on more of a journey. I hate that word, but more of a journey in this movie than he has done in the previous two.
Yeah. I think when it ended, I was elated. I thought it was really good, really good. But I don't know whether that's just because the climax and the end sequence, the credit sequence and then the post-credit sequence are really good fun. So it kind of leaves you on a really good high. I think before there was bits of the film where I was a bit like, nah, yeah, it's a bit baggy, it's a bit long.
I think probably 45 minutes in, not much happens.
Yeah.
There's no dramatic, action-heavy opener. So 45 minutes in, when still nothing's really happened, you're kind of going, oh, it's a bit slow to get going. And I wasn't really enjoying much of the movie until past that section, and then I think it really takes off.
Yeah, that said, I don't think it feels really slow, though. I think it really naturally progresses through those scenes. It didn't feel clunky or clumsy, as some of these superhero movies does, where introducing new characters and bringing new sort of set pieces in can kind of, you know, it doesn't feel natural. Whereas in this, it really did feel like to naturally flow.
Obviously, there's a section where he goes to the town in is it Ohio, and he meets Tennessee, sorry, and he meets the kid, and in other films, handled differently, it could have been really awful, like really bad. Like introducing a child character into like a superhero film, and he's like his sidekick, doesn't normally work, but it just worked really well. And I think it's because it was well scripted. It wasn't saccharine. It wasn't cheesy. So yeah, I still think it's one of the most entertaining Marvel movies there is. Yeah, it's up there. It's almost up there with Avengers. I still think Avengers is the best.
Cool. Well, you mentioned Tony Stark's journey, so let's kick off by talking about that journey. What do you think about the kind of evolution of the character over the course of this movie?
So at the beginning of the movie, he's quite insecure. Like, he's always had those kind of insecurities before. But what they really play up in this movie is post-New York, post the events of the Avengers. He's suffering from quite bad anxiety attacks. Throughout the movie, he has these mini breakdowns. And he's kind of retreated. He's passed off Stark Industries, I should say, entirely over to Pepper, and he's kind of retreated back into his workshop, and he's finding security in building more and more suits because he says, I can't protect you. So he's almost sublimated all this terror and this anxiety into building, creating.
Well, the very first sequence, there's a Tony Stark monologue, and he's talking about how he creates demons with this pre-sequence where
he says a famous man once said we create our own demons.
Yeah.
And then it goes on to show how he unwittingly created his own demons.
So I think that's kind of like the major theme, is that he's created the demons, which are the Rebecca Hall character and obviously the Guy Pearce character, but also his own personal demons as well. And that's the main point, because obviously in the second film he was quite ill. So it's kind of hard to get that vulnerability again, but they did it quite well, I think. Well, instead of it being a physical thing in the second one, it's more of a mental thing.
I think that's kind of underscored, because you won't probably know this from watching the trailers, but the way that they emphasise that vulnerability in this movie is he's not really in the Iron Man suit for that much, really. That's all towards the end. There's bits where he has parts of the Iron Man suit, like the sequence in the Mandarin's house, like bits fly back, but for a lot of the film, he is literally exposed.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, you've not mentioned it, but I think post-traumatic stress is a big part of what's happened to him. I mean, he says that I'm just a man in a can and I've met gods and aliens, and he's finding it hard to deal with all of the fallout from the end of that movie, and also discovering he's such an egotist, discovering that he's not the most powerful
Yeah.
superhero
Because
on the planet.
that's such a, no pun intended, stark contrast to the first movie, where he is such an egotist. Like, what he says, like, defiantly at the end of that movie, when they're like the press are prodding him, going, "Are you this Iron Man person?" Because until that point, it's always been like a persona, his bodyguard, is it a robot? And he just goes, "Sod it, I'm a superhero," and he accepts it. Goes, "I am Iron Man."
I am Iron Man.
But at the end of this movie, he gets rid of all the suits, he blows them all up, except maybe 42, which is in bits. And he says, "Me, Tony Stark, I'm Iron Man. I'm the one that's kind of special." Because throughout this movie, you realise that his actual genuine superpower is his intellect and his resourcefulness. Because there's lots of bits in this movie where he's not Iron Man, he's kind of like Gadget Man.
Yeah.
And I really like those scenes.
I think, again, in this one, he really learns, like, obviously it's a common trope in superhero films, but it's about the people around him and how they're affected. He really opens his eyes up, because obviously Pepper gets in peril, Happy Hogan gets nearly killed at the first half, and then obviously you've got Jim Rhodes as well, who he really has to lean on to help him to solve his problems. So I think he sort of is becoming, and maybe it's part of being in the Avengers. Yeah. It's helped him open up and learn that he needs other people.
That's
as well.
kind of his journey in the Avengers, is the fact that Thor says to him, Captain America says to him, you know, the traditional leader, says, "You're never willing to lay it down on the line." At the end of the Avengers, he's the one that saves the entire world.
Yeah.
And as you guys know, I'm not the biggest Robert Downey Jr. fan. I've found his shtick getting a bit tired after 2 Sherlock Holmes movies and 2 Iron Man movies. He seems to be doing the same thing over and over again. But I really liked his performance in this one. You mentioned his vulnerability, but he really seemed... humility he learns over the course of this movie, and he wasn't just delivering his kind of usual wisecracks and shtick. Like, there was some acting going on in this one.
I was going to say, he is kind of... I think in the popular consciousness is fused with that character. Like Extremis, you know, in the comics, lets him fuse with the armor. He is that character. Like, all those mannerisms are Tony Stark for everyone. So it's gonna be. We'll talk about it later, when will Robert Downey Jr. depart and leave the role. But if you're gonna get someone in, those kind of mannerisms, the way that he delivers, the rhythm of his diction, that is Iron Man for me now. That is Tony Stark.
And I wonder how much of what you've said about him doing a lot more acting comes from working with a different director and a different scriptwriter, because obviously you've got Shane Black now, who he's worked with before on Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and it seems like he might have been Downey Jr.'s choice rather than Marvel's, or maybe he suggested it.
Yeah, well, let's talk about Shane Black then. What did you think he kind of brought to this movie? Because he's untested in terms of being behind the camera for an action movie. Obviously, he's written Lethal Weapons and some of the best action films of the last kind of 25 years. But what do you think he brought to the proceedings, Tom?
Oh, well, I think in terms of the script, I think really shines. There are some amazing one-liners in there. Like I was saying about the bit with the kid as well. And he has that thing, "Oh, my dad left me," and he's like, "Yeah, dads leave all the time. Don't be a pussy about it." And it's just like, you don't expect that. That's such a sort of a cynical sort of 80s line.
You don't put that line into the mouth of your hero.
No. And then there's also the great line where he escapes from Killian's sort of lair, and he sort of threatens the guy, and he's like, I give up, I don't like working here, they're all weird." I just think it's great, and he just seems to get that from Downey Jr. Like, I don't know what it is, he just manages to capture his essence rather than him playing a character. He's almost, he becomes more Downey Jr. in this, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Sure, no, it doesn't. And Daniel, what do you think Shane Black brought to the
Again,
movie?
I think before, when he was first named as directing Iron Man 3, people thought he'd bring that really smart, sardonic dialogue, and he totally delivers that. I know there's great lines in that movie that I've already forgotten, and we just watched it last night, so I want to watch it again and experience all those great lines again. But I think he also brings kind of a real big, larger-than-life 80s action vibe to certain parts of the film. Like at the end, that end sequence when Rhodey saves the president from the Iron Patriot suit, and he's like sliding down a huge tanker, and he's like barrel rolling and all this stuff, jumping across a huge explosion beneath him, swinging through the air with the president. And that's just larger than life.
That and that buddy stuff between him and Rhodey when they're sort of back to back.
Is it like is it a Lethal Weapon sort of?
It is almost Lethal Weapon.
And they do that balance really well, and I don't think they've succeeded. I think that end sequence in Iron Man 2 is kind of good with Iron Man and War Machine. The action's great, but I think what they really nail in this movie is just the dynamic between the two of them.
Because yeah, I mean, for me, I think Rhodey and Tony, it's always been said they're best mates, but it's never really felt like real. But in this one, it felt genuine.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
He needed him, didn't he? He needed Rhodey for the first time, and that was interesting to watch how that changed their dynamic. He kind of leans on him for a good portion of the film.
And I mean, Don Cheadle. I mean, I don't really normally like him in most things. Like, I think.
You prefer Terrence Howard in most things.
Well, I prefer Terrence Howard, but
you've got expensive taste.
Yeah, but like I'm probably most used to him being like Ocean's 11 and those sorts of things. And in this, I just honestly thought he was brilliant.
Yeah, I thought it was great, and I wasn't a fan of. I just wanted the focus to be on Iron Man in past films, but in this one, it totally worked.
Yeah,
and putting the script together must have been a bit of a challenge to them because it's a sequel to 2 movies, isn't it? Not a sequel to 1. What do you think about the way they dealt with, following up Iron Man 2, but also following up Avengers and the fallout from that movie?
I think it was pretty difficult. Like we went to a screen last night where Shane Black introduced the movie, and he said they were kind of flying blind to a degree. They kind of got an early version of the script of the Avengers and read it while they were still writing Iron Man 3, and even if they had a script to work from, I bet that changed loads during the filming of the Avengers. They hadn't seen the Avengers when they probably started production on this. So in some moments it's intentionally vague. I think it's necessarily vague about what happened in the Avengers. There's no mention of the other characters, which is slightly disappointing. You don't hear about Captain America, Thor. So there's a bit of a hole in that sense, and they're kind of vague about what actually happens to Tony in New York, because obviously they would have known there's some kind of big incident, but it's a little bit vague.
It feels a bit clumsy the way they kept having to throw in mentions of New York.
Yeah.
Or Happy calls them his super friends.
Yeah. You've got to be careful there, I guess, with trying to cross-reference everything with everything, right? Because it's got to stand alone on its own. There's going to be an audience out there that may not have seen the Avengers, may not have seen the other 2 films, so they've got to be careful with it. But I do think it's a bit odd that he never even mentions like Captain America's name. I mean, where was Captain America throughout the whole story? Why couldn't he just call him up and say, "Can you help me out?"
Yeah, especially with the stuff about Iron Patriot. Like the US Army had like got their own superhero on the books.
He looked like Captain America.
Yeah, there's no reference from it.
And you'd think Tony would mention something like that,
Yeah, you've stolen someone's look.
Let's talk about the ensemble then, because there's quite a few characters in this movie, some old, some new. Do you think the structure of the film cope well with having all these characters coming in and out?
I think the only person that gets a bit of a short shrift is Rebecca Hall.
Maya Hansen.
Is that her actor?
Yeah.
Sorry, character, yeah. She's a great actress. I think she's really good every time she's on screen, but she just doesn't get much to do, which is a bit of a shame, really.
And she's given a real dramatic moment, isn't she?
Yeah.
I'm not sure she nailed that moment, though.
So this is the point where you realise that she's betrayed Tony and she's actually working with Aldrich.
Yeah, it's almost a twist on a twist, and you never...
And then she kind of comes
back a little bit, yeah. It was a bit messy, I thought, the stuff with her. Just because we didn't spend enough time with her to get to know who she is as a person.
Yeah.
It was maybe one character too many, I thought, with her.
Yeah, I think so.
I did like how she was first introduced in the opening sequence, which opens to your favourite song.
Blue. I don't even know who that's by. Who's it by?
Eiffel 66.
Eiffel 66.
Yeah, because that was quite an interesting, brave opening to
it really set its stall out. Yeah, it really
Yeah.
set its stall out. Because the one thing I keep saying about it afterwards is it's really goofy. It's a really goofy movie.
And we should say, like, some people so far haven't liked that. They think it's I've heard it being described as almost like an MTV like Summer Movie Awards skit. Like, it's too parodic. Like, it's too light-hearted. It's too kind of zany.
Yeah.
I
think it really worked.
Yeah, I didn't think that at all. And what about Pepper Potts, the other kind of female in the film? Were you impressed with what they did with her character?
She's largely not in it. Again, I think that's just because this movie is about Tony and more about his relationship with like Rhodey than anything. But when she's in it at the end, like the finale of the movie where she gets the Extremis powers and kicks ass, is actually, I think she does that really well.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's been in like 4 of these films now with Tony Stark, and it's always been a bit more and a bit more, and this time she really got to do something. And at the end, where she was kicking ass, it was just like, it was a fist in the air moment. It was awesome. I thought she did really well. I'm a bit of a Gwyneth Paltrow apologist. I quite like her, but yeah, I think people will see that and think maybe see her in a bit of a different light, because she's quite fun. I think.
Is she the apple of your eye?
Very good, very good.
And obviously, a big one in it is Guy Pearce as Aldrich Killian.
He's brilliant.
Yeah, we liked him, didn't we?
I quite like seeing him at the beginning of the movie as like this huge nerd who's waiting for him on the roof, and he gets betrayed.
I didn't believe him as a huge nerd. He's still not cool.
It's like that thing in Hollywood movies when like the kind of awkward looking girl, you can tell that she's amazingly beautiful.
Yeah.
She's just got glasses on. But he's a fantastic villain.
Yeah, I often find he gets sort of minor character parts, doesn't he? But in this one, he got a lot to do. And I thought he was slimy.
He's very sinister as well.
And it was quite cool not knowing going in, really. You know, he's not in the trailers too much. There was, even when they did a poster dedicated to him, I was thinking, why is he getting his own poster?
Should we talk about that then? Because there's massive deception in the movie, which is mirrored in the marketing. Because the reason that he's probably not in the marketing material too much is because he is the Mandarin.
Yeah, they're really selling the Iron Man versus Mandarin, because Mandarin is like the overarching arch nemesis of Iron Man in the comics. Like, he's the most recurring character that he comes up against.
And that's played by Ben Kingsley, or so we thought.
Today is the first day of what's left of your life.
It's all been done to generate... obviously, this is the big bad of the movie.
They've done really well to keep that secret, that the Mandarin doesn't really exist.
Yeah, I wonder how well they're going to do when it's out. Hopefully people can see it, because it's such a great reveal.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. It's just brilliant.
Do you think fans of the comic book, though, will be a bit annoyed that this great villain is kind of tossed away almost as a joke in this one?
Well, the thing is, in a sense, he's not tossed away. Like, he's not a joke, because the Mandarin is Guy Pearce. They've kind of reimagined it. Like, Guy Pearce is the Mandarin. He is in charge of the terrorist organisation that's been there since the first movie, The Ten Rings. He's been there in the shadows, manipulating events, taking Tony Stark prisoner, all that stuff. So it's just gone by another name. He's used Ben Kingsley, who's dressed up as like this ridiculous character, as a stooge. So he is there in a sense. It's just not a traditional adaptation, or a very faithful adaptation.
And he's Shane Black has been very sort of clear that he's such a difficult character to get.
Yeah, it's very much a character of its time, like a lot of those. You know, I think doing this caricature almost, you know, Shane Black did say he thought it was a racist character even.
Yeah.
So it's quite hard to bring that to the screen. And Jon Favreau said that when he first made the Iron Man movies. And I think this is probably the best way to adapt it. But I think comic book fans of comic book movies have got used to the fact that they have to do this.
They have to play hard and fast with the rules and the
mythology,
characters,
because you can't cram it all in.
And Ben Kingsley absolutely nails it in the reveal, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Like, that's one of the best scenes I've seen in a movie in a long time.
He just comes back from taking a shit. Here's the moment where he's going to go head to head with his arch nemesis. Oh, he just...
I did think that sequence was really well, like, it built up to it, and like,
yeah, it kept
Tony
on
Stark,
going as well.
It was just like going through the breaking into the mansion, all that sort of stuff.
It really pulls the rug out beneath you.
Yeah, and then obviously he comes stumbling out. He seemed to be playing the Bill Nye character in Love Actually. You know, it was very sort of similar sort of mannerisms, and but yeah, that's hilarious.
And being Brits, we were all quite impressed with the mention of Croydon.
Some great Brit references in there.
And that probably comes from the co-writer, doesn't it?
I think so, yeah, who's a Brit, as well.
He also really taps into the fact that I think Kingsley's perceived as a bit of a lovey. And he's been depicted as really failed, terrible lovey of the British theatre.
Yeah, but it's cool. It gives Kingsley and Guy Pearce like two roles almost to play in the movie,
Totally,
doesn't it? And I
yeah.
think they both did good jobs on both fronts.
When the Mandarin is doing his speeches about being a terrorist and stuff, and it's being shown on TV, it's really menacing. He has this really like odd American accent.
It is,
and his delivery is really,
because they
really
say
scary.
it's like, oh, he's a bit like a Baptist preacher, and so, like his voice. But I was speaking to someone going, why does every villain have like a really weird voice now in films? But the thing is, also, while I like kind of what he was doing, at the same time, going into the movie, was like, oh, is Ben Kingsley going to be terrible as the Mandarin? Because he's hamming it up too much. He's hamming it up too much, and then you realise, oh, because he's got this terrible actor hamming it up.
And I think the idea is because I think the way Killian has set the Mandarin up is that you can't place where he's from, and he's taken symbols and ideology and iconography from all these other societies and countries and nations,
and condense them.
and put them all together, so you really can't figure him out. And then, of course, it makes sense at the end of exactly why he's done that.
Yeah.
I think the best thing about Killian being the actual villain as well, instead of the Mandarin, was that they've actually managed to get a villain who can go toe-to-toe with Iron Man, and it not just be another guy in a big suit. Because obviously that's what's happened in the last two movies.
I really loved the final action sequence. I thought it was absolutely brilliant when all those suits arrive. And I think it's really been really smartly planned and engineered as an antidote to those first two finales of Iron Man 1 and 2, where it's two CGI metal characters just bashing each other up. It's Transformers. Whereas what they do in this one is you've got Aldrich, who is terrifying in his human form, and you've got a face to him all the time. But obviously Tony needs the suits, but because he's got so many of them and he can like switch between them, he's escaping them as Killian's destroying them, and he's jumping into new ones. I think it's really good because you get that sense of threat when he's outside the suit.
Yeah, and all the other armours just all looked so cool. It was just such a moment where everyone was just like, yes.
It's a great fan moment because you're never going to see all the different films that would involve all those different suits, but it's like a great moment where we go, here you go, here are all of them.
And he uses nearly all of them up, doesn't he? Like fighting the
He doesn't
other
use
guys.
the Hulk Buster though.
No.
I was
Is that still there at the bottom?
It's still
like,
there.
Holding the thing up? Yeah.
But it was cool the way they used Extremis to create villains that could go toe to toe with those other suits. I mean, because that's not really how Extremis is portrayed in the comics. They've kind of changed that. Do you think that's a problem, or is it just the nature of having to adapt stuff for the movies?
I think it's faithful and it makes sense within the logic of a movie. Like, you've got 2 and a bit hours to do a movie and all the exposition. I think it works really well because when it first happened, when the guy first started glowing orange with the bomb and Happy Hogan got
when they're at Man's Chinese Theatre.
At that point, I was like, oh, I'm not too sure about this. This looks maybe a little bit crap. But then
he did have some badass henchmen though. That guy who plays the main henchman, the bald guy, he was brilliant.
The guy from 24,
Is that who it's from?
James Badgedale.
Yeah. And also the female one as well.
She was really good when he was fighting them in the small town. I like that bit because it was almost like in that sequence, Tony Stark was almost doing like Home Alone on the fly.
Yeah.
I also thought that scene was a bit like Westworld as well. If you've seen that, with it was like he was in a small western town and he even
calls it Westworld, doesn't he?
Oh, he does, doesn't
he?
That's probably what I thought. And there was a Terminator vibe as well to some of the scenes. I thought with the
you just can't kill them; they keep coming.
But and also because they kept coming out of explosions, right? There was burning stuff, and they just kept walking through it.
Regenerating.
And they adapted Extremis to a degree because when he gets in the comics, Stark modifies it so he can manipulate the suit remotely. He can almost interface with the suit, almost telepathically.
And he has those things in his arms.
Yeah,
which kind of hints.
And I like the fact that they don't like really labour over what he's done there. The movie just opens with him injecting it, and you're like, well, it's fine. He's been experimenting for a year.
Well, he's been awake for 72 hours.
Yeah,
playing that disco Christmas song.
And that creates some awesome sequences where he can I like the bit where the first attack on the Malibu mansion, and he puts all the armour onto Pepper to protect her.
That was really cool. Yeah.
I mean, he says he's been experimenting. I don't know if you noticed. I think it's Mark 42 he's wearing.
Yeah.
So it was Mark 7, I think, at the end of the last movie. Yeah. So he's gone through all those iterations.
Because the trailer makes it look like there's maybe 10 suits appear, but in the movie there is like in excess of 40 or something.
Is that a Hitchhiker's Guide reference?
Is it? That's the answer to everything in the universe.
Yeah, that's right, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
Did you have a favourite sequence in the movie?
Oh, put me on the spot. Quite like the bit in where he's in the dungeon and he's tied to the thing. And he's
you kinky devil, Tom.
No, he's tied to the thing and he's going, right, you're dead in 3, 2, 1. And then he just keeps doing doing it. These guys, why did we get this shift? I thought that sequence was just brilliant.
And they play it for too long. And they play it so long it becomes funny again.
Yeah.
And he's like fighting. I like when he's just got one boot and one glove.
Yeah, and he's whizzing
He creates
around
some
the
really
room.
interesting action sequences.
Yeah.
I really like the ending, but I also really like the bit where he's saving people out of the plane.
Yeah.
It's a bit of Superman, but the way that he's describing it is like playing monkeys in monkey barrels.
Yeah.
And they're holding each other, and he says, I'm going to electrify your arms so you won't be able to let go of these people, and he catches them all. And then you find out he's doing it remotely. So I think the movie has those big dramatic moments, and then it does really good at amusingly undercutting itself. Because at the end of that sequence, the suit just flies into a truck and blows up.
Well, the one thing that sequence is missing is a man fishing in a boat that falls out of the boat when they all land in the water. That's the one thing it's missing. I thought he was going to do it because there is a man fishing, but it didn't do it.
I thought what was great about that sequence as well is because all these superhero movies are trying to find something original and new to show on screen. And I thought it did look new because it was so spectacular. And having read up on it, it's because they didn't really use any green screen.
Right,
That's all real because they got in touch with the Red Bull skydiving team and some stuntmen, and they said, we can do this for real. We don't need to use green screen. And so that's why that looks so amazing.
Really good, didn't
that's
it?
why I'm saying they got angles that you wouldn't normally be able to get using a green screen just because they were there flying around.
Wow.
But there's some really good, like, just comedic scenes, standalone comedic scenes, like when he goes into the back of the truck and he meets his biggest fan by accident, and the guy goes, "Oh, I model myself on you. Look at my entire look." And one of my favourite bits when he showed him the tattoo, and he said, "It might not look that much like you because I based it on the doll that I made of you."
What's the guy's name? Do you remember? Is it Brian or something? Gary.
Gary.
And
Gary,
he goes, he goes, "I need you, Gary." And Gary goes, "Tony needs me," or something like that. It's a really good moment.
It's probably got as many laughs as a good comedy.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
What about your favourite moment?
Well, it was going to be the skydiving scene, but as I can't have that, I think actually we talked about it after the screening. But the credit sequence at the end, the kind of 1970s TV show style, kind of sizzle reel compilation of some of the best bits of the movie, to like funky music,
previous movies as well, like some fantastic editing as well.
I mean, we were just sitting there quite entranced by that, weren't we?
Yeah, I would watch it over and over. It was really, really cool. And also it showed all the characters off and gave them all their proper credits. You know, nice credit sequence where all the actors get their
moment.
Due. Yeah.
Which brings us nicely on to, I guess, the post-credit sequence.
Yeah, we waited around for a while for that.
There were a lot of visual effects.
A lot of people worked on that movie. Also, if you stay to it, Simon Cowell worked on that movie.
Spotted that as well.
Probably not that one. So it is. So you realise the voiceover that begins the movie
and ends the movie.
Yeah, so it's kind of him telling the story, working through his problems. He's telling it to a psychiatrist or a doctor. That doctor turns out to be Bruce Banner,
who's asleep.
Who's asleep and basically missed the entire thing because he's not that kind of doctor.
So we were taking bets before we watched it, like what was going to be in there.
What did you say?
Well, I was hoping for Guardians or Ant-Man, but
yeah, I mean, we were thinking maybe Thor. But
I think a lot of people were hoping for maybe one of the newer characters.
Yeah.
So I don't know if people are going to be disappointed by that. I mean, it works perfectly for the movie to bookend the story, but I guess there's an expectation now that you're going to see something new and exciting.
Yeah, we were talking about like the next phase of Marvel films, and this is going to be such a huge movie. You thought it's a really good opportunity for them to seed that kind of more unusual project. But what we talked about is I quite like the dynamic between those two characters, and we were thinking, you know, what happens to Iron Man now? Like we said we don't really want to see Iron Man 4.
I
don't know if I want to see Iron Man 4 like this. What I was thinking is that there's no reason why some of these characters can't team up and go on buddy, you know.
This is what I was getting to, is like I think Stark and Banner are actually quite a good dynamic together. They have that great sequence in the Avengers where Stark is prodding him, going, "It's time to get your armour on, it's time to suit up."
Yeah.
And obviously they're both incredibly intelligent, they can banter back and forth. I could see them doing a movie together.
I just feel like it's come to the end of this particular story for Iron Man. Yeah. He's got a couple more Avengers movies to appear in, and then it would be nice to see them experiment, I think, with some of these other characters that they're introducing all the time for the next 5 years, I guess. Yeah,
I mean, my prediction is that, because obviously the ending of the film shows Tony has the operation to have his heart fixed and the shrapnel taken out.
Yeah.
And he's destroyed all the suits. So basically, he's now just Tony Stark again, right? No more Iron Man.
Yes, I am Iron Man.
And tellingly, the credits say Tony Stark will return. It doesn't say Iron Man will return. It says Tony Stark will return. And if you know the comic books, he ends up being the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. So maybe that's something that's coming in Avengers. And maybe the struggle will be getting Tony Stark to be recruited to be in the Avengers again.
And you know, the Avengers, as in the comics, are a fluid team. Like you can swap in different characters.
Yeah.
Tony Stark might move up as he gets older. If they want to keep Robert Downey Jr. but not have him running around, they could have him in this almost managerial position, which I think he'd be really funny in.
And I'm happy to let Iron Patriot step up and take the man in the suit role, because I just thought I'd watch a movie with
really
him now. Like,
You're a big fan, aren't you?
Yeah, I did really like it. But I'm a big fan of 2. Like, I watched it again recently, and I think when he tools up and starts shooting shit, I think it's just badass. It's awesome.
I think you just lost half the audience saying you're a big fan of 2.
Whoops.
But speaking of which, so is this the best of the Iron Man movies thus far, or?
Yeah, I think that it has the most kind of substance to it, I think, as a movie. It has the most laughs, it has the best lines, and I think it probably has the best action. So I think, judging it on those kind of merits, I think you can make a definitely strong case for it, yeah.
I think they're all as good as each other. If I had to pick one, I'd probably, to rewatch, I know, if I had to pick one, I might pick this one.
See,
only just.
I think like one really benefited from the fact of quite low expectations, where I had pretty high expectations following the Avengers for this. I definitely think it kind of met them.
Yeah.
What about you, Chris?
I think it is. Yeah. I love 1, but I just think the finale of 1 lets it down a little bit.
Really forgettable.
Yeah, it's very kind of the ending that all superhero movies had before that you've seen a million times.
Yeah.
Whereas they've had to become a bit more sophisticated in recent years, coming up with new ways to do it. And the second one, I wasn't a massive fan of. I just thought Mickey Rourke was awful in it. But yeah, this one I thought it's just really consistent, really strong, funny, exciting, and above all, really, really good fun.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it was brave, but I honestly think it's brave of Marvel to, post Avengers, hand their next project over to Shane Black, who is pretty much untested. He's done 1 feature film before directing, and let him do his own thing. And it really feels like a Shane Black film rather than necessarily a Marvel film. And the hats off to them, because they've really trusted in him, and I think he's really delivered.
And if they do a 4, would you like to see Shane Black direct it then?
Yeah, or I'd definitely like to see Shane Black work within the Marvel universe, because I think he writes good dialogue, like Joss Whedon. He writes good dialogue, does good character interaction. And I think that's obviously a great basis for a comic book movie.
Well, thanks Dan, thanks Tom. That's what we thought of Iron Man 3. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and keep it locked to IGN for all your Marvel updates.